Today, the New York Times released a report detailing allegations of sexual misconduct by comedian Louis C.K. It is a detailed report. They spoke to a number of women. In part, what they are saying is now, after years of unsubstantiated rumors about Louis C.K. masturbating in front of associates, women are coming forward to describe what they experienced, even amid the current burst of sexual misconduct accusations against powerful men. The stories about Louis C.K. stand out because he has so few equals in comedy. Louis C.K. is a huge comedic titan. Now, when the Times reached out to Louis C.K.'s publicist, whose name is Louis K, they said Louis is not going to answer any questions. Also, the Thursday premiere of his movie, I Love You, Daddy, was abruptly canceled. This also raises some questions about the anecdotes that Louis C.K. tells in his own comedy. Some are pointing to the questionable material that is in this movie that was premiering, I Love You, Daddy. There are a lot of stories. One of those stories comes from comedian Rebecca Corey. Rebecca tells her story about how she was on set for a 2005 pilot with Louis C.K. and he approached her asking if he could masturbate in front of her. Now, when she said no, and also reminded him that he had a daughter and a pregnant wife at the time, he just said that he had issues. And then this is what she says happened next. Word quickly reached the show's executive producers, Courtney Cox and David Arquette, who both confirmed the incident. What happened to Rebecca on that set was awful, Ms. Cox said in an email, adding that she felt outrage and shock. My concern was to create an environment where Rebecca felt safe, protected, and heard, she said. They discussed curtailing the production. Ms. Corey decided to continue with the show. Things were going well for me, Ms. Corey said in the statement, and I had no interest in being the person who shut down a production. A lot of what you're hearing in this report is women with experiencing fear of speaking out because this is such an incredibly powerful figure in Hollywood, also represented by a very powerful manager in Hollywood. The article calls out his manager, Dave Becky, who certain women say tried to silence them from sharing their story. Dave Becky, Louis C.K.'s manager, wanted them to stop telling people about their encounter with Louis C.K. Lee Kernis, one of the women's managers at the time, confirmed on Thursday that he had a conversation in which he told Mr. Becky that Louis C.K.'s behavior toward the women had been offensive. Mr. Kernis also said that Mr. Becky was upset that the women were talking openly about the incident. Now, when the Times reached out to Mr. Becky, he said that he doesn't recall the specifics of this conversation, which took place between two comedians, a Ms. Goodman and a Ms. Wolov, but he did know that he never threatened anyone. So he's come out saying that that is not something that he did. He right now represents Kevin Hart, Aziz Ansari, Amy Poehler, as well as a number of other comedic performers. So that's something that they want to point out when it comes to the abuse of power in the industry and people that were complicit in this. Tig Notaro is a comedian whose Amazon series One Mississippi lists Louis C.K. as an executive producer, and she has spoken out against Louis C.K. She says, in part, sadly, I've come to learn that Louis C.K.'s victims are not only real, she said by email, but many are actual friends of mine within the comedy community, like Ms. Corey, who confided in her. She said, I think it's just important to note that Ms. Notaro is coming out and speaking because the comedy community is so insular and protective, and it is important that we celebrate these voices that are coming forward and standing with the women. Now, people are wondering, what is Louis C.K. saying? Now, he hasn't released a statement as of this taping, but some women are saying that after the fact, he did apologize to them, but those apologies have some troubling implications. For example, Ms. Corey says that she received an email from Louis C.K., which then followed up with a phone call from Louis C.K. apologizing for his behavior in 2005. This took place in 2015. She says when he phoned her, he said he was sorry for shoving her in a bathroom. Ms. Corey replied that he had never done that, but he had instead asked to masturbate in front of her, responding in a shaky voice. He acknowledged it and said, I used to misread people back then, she recalled. So I know that's a lot of information. I wanted to just break down the article. There's a lot in there, and I would urge you to please read the full article so you can get the full context of the story. Now I want to toss over to you guys. What was your response in reading this?
Were you surprised? Because
it had been out there, huh?
Yeah, I've been a fan of Louis C.K. and you heard some of these rumors in the past, and I actually want to make an interesting note about that too. Like, Gawker uncovered the majority of the things that the New York Times discussed back in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And at the time, you thought they were unsubstantiated rumors, that you thought that they were potentially accusations, and Gawker already had like a troubled history. So people didn't really pay much attention to it, and because, like you said, because Louis C.K. is so powerful and his manager was so powerful, because he's such a comedic powerhouse, and comedy is such an insular community, people kind of kept it under wraps for a very long time.
Public opinion hadn't swayed that way. So one of the co-authors of this New York Times article was also an author on the Harvey Weinstein piece.
Yeah.
So I think that what we have seen recently is this snowball effect. If Harvey Weinstein can be taken down, who else has been abusing their power can be taken down. So I think that it's good to bring up the Gawker piece, because I've seen that on Twitter. A lot of people are saying, hey, Gawker was already talking about this. Why didn't anyone care? Because the unfortunate truth of the matter is that no one believed these women yet. They were saying, oh, it's rumor. Louis C.K. himself, when he was asked about this, would always dismiss it as rumor. I'm not gonna address it because if I talk about rumors, then it makes them bigger than they are. Well, now you have women that are speaking on the record who feel as though they are to be believed, because if Harvey Weinstein can be taken down, then why can't we take down the bigwig of comedy as well, who has been abusing his power for years and years and years?
Yeah, it was just a cry on the night before, and now the whole culture is swinging in this direction. And as you say, the snowball effect. It felt very Cosby-ish before, you know. Cosby was known for a long time. And even that account that you read with the young actress feeling as though, well, I've complained, but I don't want to shut this whole production down. Back in the early Cosby stories, you kind of heard that same thing. Like you heard, who's going to believe me? They're going to believe me, or they're going to believe this comedy titan? And you also heard, I don't want to end my career. I don't want to shut this production down. I don't want to shut my career down. So I think there's so many reasons that people didn't step forward before, but now in this culture and climate, it's safe to step forward. And so all the things that we had heard or read in Gawker now get some authenticity, because so many people are coming forward now, are comfortable with it.
At this stage, Louis has not released a statement, although he did cancel his premiere. He also canceled an appearance on Late Night with Stephen Colbert. So I'm wondering, what do you think is the move from here? Will he be releasing a statement? Like, I don't know what happens here. Or do you think that we'll see charges pressed for some of this?
There's a statute of limitation when it comes to this sort of stuff, and depending on the severity of the crime itself.
Do you think we'll see more women come forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's always obviously a civil suit that could potentially be launched against Louis C.K. and I hope there are some punitive measures. Because look, we need to have a system of deterrence. Like, we need to make sure that in the future, people do feel unsafe. And by the way, I don't just mean men, women too. Anyone who coerces others, abuses their power, their position of power to gain sexual favors from unwanted victims, or even in certain instances abuses them physically, it should be punished in some capacity. And most importantly, be fearful that there could be some sort of widespread movement that outs them. And having said that, though, there are a lot of accusations being launched at the moment. We also must not forget, while we should believe women, because the majority of the time they are absolutely true, and they get nothing out of coming out, and they have everything to lose when they come out and talk about these things, and it's also emotionally tolling. We shouldn't forget that there is such a thing as due process in the end of the day. But obviously, if there are 20 people identifying identical instances and with one person, and that's usually a pattern that we've seen with Bill Cosby. Everyone usually says the exact same things. Everyone has similar experiences. Same with Louis C.K. He masturbated in front of them, pulled them into the room. Harvey Weinstein got naked in front of them in a hotel room. Like, their acts are usually similar. So there's a pattern that we can observe to assess whether or not there is validity. And I think in this instance, absolutely. But again, let's not forget that there is such a thing as due process, because there are certain people that have been accused as well, where there's only one victim, and before an actual case is launched against them, to vilify someone publicly is also could potentially be problematic down the line.
Yeah, there's been no presumption of innocence in many of these cases, and it's a really interesting point that Hassan makes, because there has been no, well, let's wait for due process to take its course, for precisely the reason that Hassan is identifying, which is it's the same MO with all of these women in all these different cases, with the Weinstein case, with this case. And as these stories come forward, and this has the additional element where she actually went to producers and said, hey, this just happened. And so they corroborated also.
Many of the women in the article, and they have corroborated their stories with other people that they spoke to following the incident. So this isn't just women coming forward and seeking out the New York. The New York Times really did did their due diligence to track down these people and get statements from other people on the set or their managers, other people they worked with. Who
they made contemporaneous complaints to their friends, like, you'll never believe what just happened type stuff. And you need that to create a situation that clearly points to the legitimacy of a claim and of an assault. But the reason that so many companies are closing down production, the reason that they're reshooting movies right now with Kevin Spacey not in it anymore, and the reason is because of what Hassan is talking about, which is that these stories are credible, and they're credible because all the elements are the same. The MO is there from too many people, and as Grace says, and those people told others at the time.
Help us build independent media together. TYTnetwork.com/join.